but it's been perfected in the last couple decades. And part of its popularity and widespread adoption most recently is because we are able to have grid-tied systems. I'm going to go over what that means a little bit more coming up here, but what you see in this illustration is a grid-tied system. So the sunlight that we enjoy every day, especially sunny days, shines down on your solar array. A common misconception is that if it's cloudy, that solar will not produce any energy at all. That's not true. It will produce energy, not 100% like on a crystal clear day. However, your array will still be generating when it's overcast. Your array will then create and produce direct current energy, and that will, as you can see from the number 1 to step number 2, an inverter will convert that into alternating current energy, which is what we use in our homes and businesses. Then that power, that alternating current, is then fed to your electrical panel. Every property already has one of these, so you feed right into that. And any excess will flow back to the grid in a grid-tied system. Now, you're probably wondering, will I get paid for that? Currently, here in Georgia, there is no agreement or program where you can, on a net metering agreement, get compensated for that extra energy. So it's important to size your system accordingly so you're not generating any freebies. Then in the evening, when your solar array is not cranking out power because the sun is down, the grid will supply your energy source. So you could think of a grid-tied system, you could think of the grid as your battery backup. Now, I'm going to start speaking some solar jargon, and I wanted to make sure that everyone kind of knew some of the common solar terms, so you can sound like a solar rock star when you're talking about solar to those in your community. And in Georgia Solar, we're really here to embrace solar in Georgia, to be that knowledge source for you, and to make sure that your communities, your schools, that everyone is engaged in solar in a way that is educational and accessible. So just to start, I'm not going to read these, but the alternating current, as you heard and saw in the last illustration, is what we use in our homes and businesses, and that's important because it is part of the process. This handsome fellow down here on the right bottom corner is Nikola Tesla. He created alternating current, and I thought to bring some levity and put his face on this glossary screen. An array, next term, is basically a collection of modules. That's what the term we use when we're looking at a number of panels hooked together. So instead of saying solar system, which might confuse people if you're talking about astronomy, we say a solar array. A solar cell is just that little square within a solar module, and I'll get to a solar module very soon. But the solar cell is what's produced and included in the solar array that generates your direct current energy. And again, direct current is the type of electricity that your solar system generates before you use an inverter and turn it into alternating current. Grid, as I had mentioned and showed in the previous slide and illustration, is what we call the utility network that we are all connected to. If you have a cabin in the woods in which you're not hooked up to a utility, then you are not grid tied. So that is the general term we use. And when I say utility, obviously I'm speaking for the EMCs and Georgia Power here in Georgia. A hybrid system is just what you might think, a hybrid. There's two sources of power, like a diesel generator, for instance, and a photovoltaic system. If you had an off-grid system, you could have an hybrid system as well. Maybe you've got your photovoltaic, meaning your solar arrays, generating electricity during the day, and at night you have a diesel generator. That's just an example of a hybrid system. An inverter, as I mentioned, turns your electricity from the DC current that the solar array produces into the alternating current that we use in our homes. Kilowatt is a really good metric to know and embrace in solar, and in your examination of your energy consumption. Kilowatt is the basic unit that we use when we're looking at utility bills, and that's just 1,000 watts. It's a metric system. And kilowatt hour is again that 1,000 watts over a period of time. So if you look at your old light bulbs, the Edison ones, and you see 60 watts, well, it uses 60 watts per hour. So that's a good barometer for you to really understand what a kilowatt hour is representing. When I say load, I'm not talking about a lazy person. I'm referring to the entire electric need that you might have for a home or a business. So everything lumped together, your TV, your fridge, your computer, all of that's fed into your meter, that's your load. So when we say your peak load, we would be referring to that time of day where you're consuming the most energy as a whole, as a household. If you remember, I had just briefly talked about a module. A module is important. That's basically a solar panel. So when I say solar module, I'm talking about a solar panel, one and the same. Again, the standalone system is one that's not hooked up to a utility or a grid network. It operates independently of. And voltage and watt, just some energy terms again. Watt is a unit of power, and this illustration just shows very cleverly this relationship, but we don't need to get into that completely. So I'm sure you're all wondering, am I a great solar candidate? Am I a good solar candidate? How would I know? And this slide has a really great flow chart for you to start evaluating whether or not you're a good solar candidate. And I'm not going to walk you through this. You can see this on your screen. We will have these slides for you to look at after the broadcast. But there's a couple basic points that you can just easily tell yourself if you're a good solar candidate. If you have a sunny southern exposure on your roof or property, southern is best because we are in the northern hemisphere. But if you have a good western exposure, that could be a candidate. If you're the owner of the property, a lot of tenants, especially in the commercial, are hoping that they can go solar. Well, the decision is really for the property owner. So you can talk to your landlord about your request for solar energy, and we would encourage you to. Please talk to your community about embracing solar. But in order to make that executive decision, you'd have to be the owner of the property. If your roof is less than 7 years old, now I'm talking about a roof application where the panels would be on your roof, but it's important to have a roof that's somewhat new because clearly in order to repair or replace that roof, you would have to remove the modules beforehand. Putting modules on your roof will actually extend the life of your roof just because it's protecting it from the sun, clearly, and then also from some of the weatherization. If you pay more than $100 on your electric bill, now, this is an interesting benchmark. $100 is a good place to start. I would say here in Georgia, maybe $200, but that's up to you to decide what your priorities are. Is it an environmental priority? Is it a cost savings priority? Is it to look great as the solar person on the block? Whichever. If you pay more than $100, you're going to see a better return, a better financial picture. And if you're considering a long-term investment, solar, even though the ROI has decreased rapidly with the decrease of the actual cost of these solar arrays, it's still a long-term investment because of the longevity of the life of a solar installation. A solar installation will function for 25 years plus. In the industry, we say that solar panels, solar modules, have a life of 25 years because the warranties are typically for 25 years. However, we know from arrays that were installed in the 70s and that are still functioning that our new technology should produce systems that last way beyond 25 years. So clearly, that is something better suited for a long-term investment. Now, you remember me mentioning the grid-tied versus standalone systems and how they relate. Well, I know I'm a visual person, and so to look at this graphic here, we see the differences between the two. Again, if you are hooked up to your utility grid, you have a grid-tied system. And if you just follow this diagram right here, very similar to the first one illustration we saw, your power is produced, goes into your inverter, turns into AC energy, which is then connected to your breaker panel. Everyone knows what this looks like, which is then connected to your meter, and you're working in conjunction with the grid. So it's important to note that when the grid goes down, if a limb falls out on your street and all of a sudden you don't have power, well, unfortunately, your solar array will lose power as well. And that's because of a safety feature called islanding. We want to make sure that our linesmen and women are safe when they're repairing the grid, when it is not functioning. And if your solar array were to be cranking up when the grid is down and you have a grid-tied system such as in this illustration, then you would have power going into the lines, and that would not be safe for our linesmen working on the lines. They could potentially get electrocuted. So remember that. That's why with a grid-tied system, your solar array will not be functioning if the grid goes down. Kind of the opposite of that is a standalone system. It's pretty self-explanatory with the title stand alone. It is not tied to the grid. This is what you would see when you have a solar application on, say, a cabin in the mountains. This would include your battery bank, and through this diagram we can quickly see how everything's connected. Your charge controller basically controls how much power is fed to the batteries. You know, batteries are pretty sensitive. The technology that we're using now is pretty sensitive. You don't want to overcharge them, and you don't want them to discharge too much, or they will get damaged. So that's what this charge controller does. And then you can connect to DC circuits again if you need AC power to plug in your phone, plug in your typical household devices. Then that's what your inverter is for. The con for this type of system is the extra expensive batteries. You might have seen in the news how batteries are really catching up to where solar is as far as the sophistication of the technology. But currently, here in 2015, I'm not sure that they are ready for widespread adoption. A battery bank will last you 7 to 10 years. There's an amount of maintenance that you must do on batteries, and they can be quite expensive. Not to mention the amount of batteries that you need for storage is pretty significant, and you would need that space, especially coated, to store them. So that is one of the disadvantages, but of course one of the advantages, as we spoke of, is you have power when the grid's down. You're completely independent of the grid. So these are the two systems that solar really is applied to. And for the most part, we're going to be talking about this system on the left, or the grid-tied system. Solar array sizing. How do you know how big your solar array should be? Well, and that kind of comes back to, hey, well, how much does it cost? Of course, we would want to give you a simple answer to that, but really that depends on the size. And the size is going to depend on how much power you use and how much you pay per kilowatt hour. So I've got an example here of a Georgia Power bill. This was taken right off their website. This is Jane's bill. Jane uses about $140 a month here, and right here is what we're really looking for. We're looking to see this consumption, this box here 17. This is really useful when sizing a system. This is what we need to know when it comes down to how many kilowatt hours are you actually using, so we can size the system accordingly. So what does that mean? Well, when you're talking to a solar professional, you want to really be able to provide 12 months of historical data. Clearly, as you can see, in August when it's super hot, Jane's using a whole lot more power than in January or February. I'm assuming that you might have gas heat, not have to crank it up in these months here, but typically you will see a curve for your month. So if you only provided, say, 3 bills of the wintertime months, then you wouldn't have an accurate picture of your actual usage for the whole year. And it's important to get that because, again, if your system is oversized, you're not going to get compensated, at least not at a level to make it profitable in selling any of that extra power to the grid. But if you provide a good picture of 12 months, then your solar professional can really tell you that sweet spot and how to size your system. And usually, going back to that peak load, usually that is the power that you're using in the super hot days, the middle of the days, from 10 to 3. So that's when, and Jane included, everyone's cranking up their AC and trying to stay cool. And that's when you're using the most power. So luckily, solar generates the strongest between those hours, just because that's where we get the most sun. Also, be conscious of changes in your usage. It's funny, I've experienced people that have gone solar, and then they're so excited to see the savings on their bill that they start getting more comfortable with their usage. Maybe they don't turn their lights off anymore. Maybe their lifestyle changes a little bit, and then they're back to kind of where the bill they had before the solar savings. It's good to be conscientious of how much you're using and how that's going to affect your output. If, for instance, you're handing over this information of these 12 months of historical data to your solar professional, and in the last month you got an electric car or you bought a jacuzzi, you would want to make sure to tell your solar professional that, because that's going to change how much power you use, which in turn is going to change the size of your system. It's best to have copies of your actual bill. This way we can see a number of metrics that can help to make the solar sizing decision. But if you don't have copies of your bill, sometimes you can just provide, say, your usage rate. Say you pay 13 cents a kilowatt, or your total usage. You've got to know how much energy you use. A solar professional could work off of that, but again, it's always better to have your bills. And then this is more for our commercial customers. It's really important to make note of your rate plan. Do you have a time of use plan with your utility? It's good to make note of that and to share that with your solar professional so they can size an accurate system for you. So on to pricing, solar array pricing. We saw in the former slide what it takes to get a good size, and then with that size, the solar array is priced per watt. So, what does that mean? Well, basically, you're going to see a per watt cost, and as you can see in this chart over here on the right, the price per watt has decreased exponentially up until our current year of 2015. And that's mainly because of advances in technology, globalization, etc. However, I do believe we've reached a plateau in this decreasing cost. Similar to any technology, when you're an early adopter, one of the first adopters, maybe you're paying a premium. If you were one of the first people to get a flat screen, you know that you paid more than the people purchasing flat screens today. However, we're not going to see the cost of flat screens unless maybe it's a Black Friday sale coming down anymore. And I would say it's very comparable to solar. So right now, the price per watt is at a nice level point in order to make your buying decision. And then it's important to note also that the larger the array, typically the less per watt cost. That is just basically the economy of scale. Since your solar installer is going to be up there on your roof or on your land, putting the array up anyway, basically if you can buy in bulk, it helps with the cost. Again, you need to find that sweet spot between the size of your array and the economy of scale there. You don't want to oversize a system just because. However, that's what you're going to see. And typically, because of that, residential systems are going to be more expensive per watt than your commercial systems, because residential systems are typically smaller than your commercial applications. Again, you see how the cost has dropped in this line graph here. When you hear balance of system, what does that mean? Or you see the abbreviation BOS cost, that is basically everything except the solar modules or the solar panels. That's your wiring, your switches, your mounting system, your inverters, or for a standalone system, your battery banks and battery chargers. Now let me talk about mounting systems for a second here. It's important to note, especially when you have a flat roof. Actually, I'm talking about flat roofs here in commercial applications, more prevalent than residential, although if you have a flat residential roof, this applies to you as well. You can use what's called a ballast system, and that basically means that you do not have to penetrate the roof deck. You're basically weighting the panels down as a ballast would do. So that's a good example of a mounting system that you would use. Another term for a mounting system is a racking system. And you can work with your solar professional to find out what type of racking or mounting system is really a good fit for your solar application. Just as a little extra here, we've got a pie chart that shows the proportions of a solar project cost. And this goes back to see the balance of system cost, the inverters. Those are actually together there. And then your PV modules. So as you can see, the PV modules are really the bulk of the cost. Installation is really a pretty small factor in the project cost. So again, you want to be ready to make a solar investment. You're really not going to see much savings when it comes down to trying to reduce labor costs. Really, it's just a matter of participating in, say, a collective buying program, a solarized program, if you will, to get that economy of scale for a larger system, or it is your PV modules, and we'll get to that in a second here. So a part of that balance of system cost is your microinverter application. And if you remember, going back to the first slide, your solar array produces DC energy, direct current energy. And then you need an inverter to convert it to the AC energy that we use every day. So there are two types of inverters typically, and they're depicted here in this illustration. You either have your microinverters or your string inverters. And this is a really good illustration to show you what the real difference is. A microinverter, starting with those, it's basically a little inverter for each and every solar module. And because of that, they will give you a readout on the energy data for each module. This can be very helpful for maintenance. For instance, if this panel 1 goes down, you will be able to monitor that remotely with your microinverter. This data is actually in the cloud, so typically, depending on your inverter software, some of which are proprietary, but it's pretty standard that you can get a really cool readout from some of these panels with your microinverter software that you can view on a laptop remotely. It's best with partial shading issues. And what does that mean? Well, with a string inverter, which is what you see here on the top, if a cloud passes over one of these panels, two of these panels, it will knock the entire string out. And all of these guys here connected to this string inverter are on a string. So it would temporarily, because the cloud's going to pass over, it's going to knock out your power production for this. And so, that can really take a toll on your output, especially if you say you have just a couple limbs of a beautiful tree hanging over. It's really not too much of a problem because, maybe they start shading later in the day, or maybe the shade has passed by, say, 11 o'clock, not totally restrictive. Well, that shade from those branches and those hours would still knock this entire string out. For the microinverters, however, it would only knock out the particular panel. So, similar to Christmas lights. If one light goes out with a string inverter, they all go out. With a microinverter, if one panel goes out, then these other panels will continue to produce electricity. And back to the data that a microinverter will produce. It's really great for schools and for learning applications, just because it is so dynamic. String inverters, however, are typically less expensive than microinverters. And they are best, again, with full sun where you have no shading to work around. They have an average lifespan of around 10 years and a warranty that would match that. And they're better for larger arrays, especially if you have a ground-mounted array. It won't reduce output. I won't get too technical here, but inverters have a drag when they're converting that DC energy to AC energy. A little bit gets lost, if you will. And so sometimes a string inverter can help reduce that drag. So solar installation and maintenance, and this is probably what you really want to know. How do I start the buying process? Where do I start? Well, basically, you want to look for a NABCEP certified professional for the install, and that, as you can see from this logo, stands for North American Board of Certified Energy Practitioners. Quite a mouthful, but NABCEP is around to make sure that all of our installers follow a pretty strict criteria and training. And if you know anybody, say a veteran or someone who's looking for a career change, I would encourage you to point them in the direction of NABCEP. There's a lot of information that they can find on their web portal, and in addition, our web portal at georgiasolar.org. So obtain a few bids for your solar application. Just like any other construction process, you want to make sure that you can be able to compare those. Again, get a experienced NABCEP installer. There are a lot of installers in Georgia, and there's a lot more now that we've got some new legislation, which I'll talk about in a second. So it's important to choose someone who's experienced, and in particular, that knows this Georgia market. States independently have different legislation when it comes to nuances when it comes to solar applications. So it's always helpful to find someone who is within the state and can know what you can really do here, because what you can do in Georgia is not exactly the same as what you can do in another state such as New Jersey or California. And in prepare-like technologies, not all solar modules or solar panels are the same. Not all inverters are the same, as we saw on the last slide. So it's important to be able to know how to compare those technologies. And back to sizing a system accurately. Obviously this is important because I'm I'm repeating it, several times, but it is important to size it accurately. You want to investigate any service contracts, and I'm going to talk about maintenance in a quick second here. But solar requires maintenance, just like anything does, but a really limited amount of maintenance. It's always great to have a professional come out and look at your system, but the basics you can pretty much do yourself. So really investigate those opportunities to make sure that you're buying something that's going to cover your needs, but not buying something that's a little excessive for solar maintenance. And then consider a solar service agent or solar buying agent. There are several around that will basically walk you through the process that you see above here, the aforementioned bullet points. Excuse me. Almost all solar panels come with a 20 to 25-year warranty. Basically, as I had mentioned, that is the expected life of solar panels is more than that, but the warranty is 20 to 25 years, and that's why we use that metric there. Some panels come with less. I have not seen too many with more. This is a good standard to use. Again, the inverters come with a 10 to 25-year warranty, and it's important to note that when you're making that purchasing process. Inverters typically have a shorter lifespan than your panels, so you might have to replace them at year 10, and so that's a consideration when you're making your initial purchase. Keep your panel surface clean with water only. I know we've got a lot of pollen in Georgia. Sometimes you can get some soot or just some dust on your panels, and that is going to reduce their output just because you're blocking the light from accessing those solar cells. So as you can see in this illustration, we've got a cleansing brush so you can kind of reach those hard spots, but something that's very soft bristles, and basically what you can use as a comparison is you want to clean them, to wipe them off similarly than you would your car. You don't want to scrub or rub, and also you really don't want to use any type of soap product. It's really not necessary when cleaning your panels off. I would advise, depending on how dirty they are, that you would need to do this twice a year, maybe once a quarter, but certainly not every week. Solar financing options. How are you going to pay for your solar installation? How are you going to finance it? Well, luckily, here in Georgia, we now have the opportunity to use what's called a third-party model. And simply put, that is where a investor or a third party or a solar financing agent owns your system. So, similar to a lease agreement, you are making payments to utilize the power generated from that system on the equipment. So this model is really great if you're really not interested in owning the actual solar equipment itself. And how does that play out? Well, that's a smaller upfront cost because clearly you're not purchasing an entire solar array. Of course, you're still going to make a monthly fee similar to a lease payment. And then that third party, that investor, that solar financing agent, it's their equipment, so they're responsible for the maintenance and the operation of that. So again, it's important to look at your service agreements to make sure that they're going to be able to take care of what is basically on your property. The third party, because they have the ownership of the solar array, of the equipment, they get the investment tax credit, and we're going to touch on that in a second, but it's important to note that with a third party scenario, because you are not owning it, a third party is, the third party gets the investment tax credit. And then you might be wondering, well, what if I move? Well, that lease agreement, that solar financing agent agreement will transfer over to the new owner of the property. So here in Georgia, this third-party model is new, but it's really not new for the rest of the country. for almost a decade, there has been this third-party model, and luckily, Georgia has been able to learn from some of the growing pains of that model. And now that we're ready to adopt it, we can apply some of those lessons. And one of those lessons is how to transfer that to a new owner. And that's something to discuss in person with your solar financing agent if this were the way that you wanted to go. The ownership model, on the other hand, is as it says. That's when you're buying the equipment yourself. Now, that can mean taking a lump of cash and paying that way, or financing it with a home equity loan or some other line of credit that you might have. But you're basically owning the solar array itself. So, when I mentioned those different lines of financing for an ownership model, that is you're self-financing the equipment. And because you're going to own the equipment, you get that investment tax credit. So ownership is really great if you have a big tax liability. Again, this is a credit. It's not a rebate. You've got to have the tax appetite, and that is 30% currently. So it could be quite profitable to be able to write that off with the investment tax credit as an owner of your solar array. You are responsible for the maintenance costs and operation, however. So it's important with the ownership model to choose a solar professional that's going to be around that you can call so they can come over for your maintenance costs, because those are your responsibility. Obviously with some of the electrical, you still need a professional to perform that maintenance, but it's your job to make that call if something goes down. It's a better long-term picture, and this is pretty similar to other large ticket items, for instance, automobiles. When you're looking to just own something outright, usually, not all the time, but usually you're going to see your ROI, really make sense for the long term. With the third-party model, as you can see in this helpful chart at the top of your screen, you're still making those payments, and these third-party agreements are for a minimum really of 15 years. So it's important to look at some of the advantages of either or, and both are available to you now in Georgia. So as you can see, some of these scenarios, a 5-year loan, say your payments are going to be in this range, and then when it's paid off, clearly you're realizing that savings without that payment. But as you can see with this PPA, it's basically what we're in this application is similar to this third-party scenario. You're still making those payments. You might have an opportunity for a buyout, but that again is getting a little detailed and something to work out with your solar financing agent. So solar incentives, everyone wants to know, hey, what can I get to help me with this cost? And I do have good news for you. The federal investment tax credit of 30% is still extant here in 2015. We're in June, almost July, a couple weeks here. But all that to say, your 30% federal tax credit is still applicable. But I guess good news, bad news. The bad news is that's going to decrease at the end of 2016 to 10%. So it's important to really, especially if you're going to do the ownership model that we spoke of, that you check out when you're going to be buying the system. Consult your tax professional, your CPA, and talk to them about some of your plans for this, and they can help you, figure that out particularly for your situation. And you can carry this credit forward for the life of the system, or again, for 25 years. So if you don't have the tax liability in year one, then you can carry it forward. Also, for businesses, you can utilize accelerated depreciation. Basically, we know that the life of the system is 25 years, but you can depreciate the entire value of the system in those first 5 years. So that can be another very helpful strategy to reducing your costs up front. Again, that is for commercial applications only. So I talk about this tax credit. It's still excellent, still wonderful. However, you got to get in before the deadline. Your system has to be completely installed, including connected to the grid, by basically midnight on December 31st, 2016. It's important that you know that, because even if you have a contract signed as the law, the tax code is defined now, you're not going to be able to take advantage of that if it is not interconnected by that deadline. And then we all know that sometimes we take a while to make decisions, and we leave things to the last minute. Well, if you're going to make that call, just realize that a lot of people are going to be thinking like you. Hey, this is our last chance to get this credit, and so you might not make that time constraint if you wait to the last minute, as everyone's having the same thought, and the bulk of those installations is going to push your timeline back. So there's a really great site to check out, and this is the address you can see on your screen right here, surrounded by this yellow oval. DesireUSA.org, DSIREUSA.org, and this can help you evaluate all of the incentives for renewable energies in Georgia. And it's important to actually check to see the deadline for some of these programs before you get excited. Look into them a little bit more to see if they are still extant. But here in Georgia, we don't have currently a state tax incentive, but we do, and we still are able to take advantage of this investment tax credit, or as we affectionately call it, the ITC. All right, well, I'm going to open it up for questions, but first I want to show you our Georgia Solar website. We really encourage you to visit us at gasolar.org and check out all of the resources we have here. Especially if you're not already a member, please look at our member tab, click on Get Involved, click on Member and Sponsorship, and look at all of the goodies that are available to our members here. I brought it up here on this page. Click on that. It'll take you to this sheet, take you to this very useful document, and you'll be able to see what the different levels of membership mean. And I would encourage you to talk to your schools, talk to your government officials about becoming members and supporting solar in that way. And in addition, if you have a business or know a number of business owners and they're excited about solar, they want more resources for solar, there are sponsorship opportunities available. Again, this can be found if you go to the membership, the Get Involved, the Membership Sponsorship tab. And of course, we've got choosing a solar installer, why solar, solar incentives, more of what we covered in more detail on the site. These slides are also going to be available as well on our site. So again, we opened it up for some questions, and just want to cover a couple. Okay. And I see you have quite a few here. Let me pick a couple out. We've got a question about net metering. Will Georgia Power pay for avoided costs? Yes. However, that figure, not getting into too much detail, is typically not one that would make it a profitable venture for you to size an array in order for that. So that's when I say if you're looking to size an array and you're paying a per watt cost to be able to do that, when it comes down to a good ROI, that avoided cost is really not going to factor positively into your calculations. Yes, I have heard about the inverters. The next question here: have you heard about very few inverters that are now equipped with an outlet that can supply power when the grid is off. Absolutely. I love those. Sunny Boys is one brand of them, and they can be very useful. However, when we are talking about a grid-tied system, traditionally it's important to note that the grid, when the grid goes down, your system will go down as well. But if this is something that you're really interested in, make sure you mention that to your solar professional up front. There's a size constraint. It's about 3 kW systems. I haven't found one of these inverters that will handle a smaller system with this feature. But talk to your solar professional from the inception of your project if that's a direction that you'd like to go. But that's a great question. Thank you. We've got a question, doesn't shading only reduce power output, not knock out the entire system? When I mentioned knocking out the entire system, actually no, it doesn't knock out the entire system. It knocks out the entire string for a string inverter. And that's one of the differences between the application of a microinverter and a string inverter. A good way to think about it is like Christmas lights. If one panel is shaded in a string inverter installation, then the whole string will go down. But not so much with a microinverter. And again, that's something to tell your solar professional up front. Hey, I'm interested in microinverters, or I don't need all that extra data, so a string inverter is fine for me. A list of installers can be found on our website, georgiasolar.org. A question here, can panels be covered by homeowners insurance without a special rider? Now, I really don't have a blanket answer for that, as all homeowners insurance policies are very individual. So I would make sure to have that conversation within your buying process, as you don't want to have any surprises when you put that up. But more of our popular insurance carriers are now more comfortable and more familiar with solar applications, particularly for residential. So have that conversation from the inception of your project. How good is resale value when you own array and sell your home? Is your home more or less attractive to buyers? The neighbors are afraid the value of their home will go down if they see your array. Sad to say. That is sad. However, that gets down to a question of aesthetics, which are always very personal. I, for one, love the appearance of solar panels. I'd much rather see a solar panel installation than, say, a mountain top removal. However, it is really to each their own. You might have neighbors that are absolutely thrilled to see that, and your block makes the entire block look savvy. As a matter of fact, I've known some neighborhoods where they wanted to put the solar array on the side of the property that wasn't optimal so that more people could see it. Again, it's a personal decision there, but when it comes down to resale value, it absolutely adds to the resale value of your home, because the operational costs of your home or your business are going to be significantly less with your array. And then, of course, if you have one of those inverters that we talked about, that might create a feature of redundancy. Again, it will help. They've showed that it will help to sell your property faster as well. But this is a good question when it comes down to the HOA associations, the homeowners associations. Currently in Georgia, they can say, hey, you know what, we're not going to do that as a collective, but I would encourage you to have those conversations. It is a personal thing, but solar adds so much value to the operational costs as well. So have those conversations and give some people time and their own information and the resources like our website so they can become more familiar with it. You know, typically when you get resistance, it might be because of lack of understanding. So we're here to help out with that, and gasolar.org. So I've got a great question here. Can I talk about energy efficiency improvements? Should you do them before or after installing solar? Great question. Energy efficiency should really come before considering solar. In order to size the system accurately, you need to get a really good picture of how much energy you consume. And if you install a solar array according to your traditional usage, and then that usage decreases because you've installed some better lighting, some LED lighting, for instance, then your array might be too large. And again, that sizing your array accurately is very important. So all that to say, yes, energy efficiency improvements need to come first. And that's, you know, your lighting retrofits, you know, looking at Energy Star appliances, and then having an energy audit, you know, of your entire, again, back to the load, your entire electric load. So great question, thank you. And make those energy efficiency improvements first. I've got an interesting question. Can you have a grid tie system with storage like a standalone? If so, would it be practical? Well, I'm going to venture to say that you can, absolutely. You know, this is going to be a special application. But yes. But is it practical? No. Unless, you know, you're not really concerned about the expense of the system with your battery. If that is negligible to you, then absolutely go ahead and look into battery backup, because, you know, one of the most prohibitive elements of a standalone system are those batteries. They're going to need maintenance. They're going to need replaced, you know, as soon as 7 years. So that could make them, you know, quite a bit extra when you could just be excited about, you know, having a grid-tied system. And then we did talk about some of those bimodal inverters too. So again, have that talk with your solar professional. There's a question about solar rights laws in the U.S. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to cover that today. But you know, we here in Georgia Solar are always staying attuned to some of the new changes here in the U.S. You know, I think if you were to really want to take a supportive stance on solar, it would be in supporting the investment tax credit. There has been some talk in extending that. You know, I'm not sure if that's going to happen, as no one is. But currently, I would say that that is one of the foremost issues in the industry, is seeing if we can't extend that 30% beyond the end of 2016. Okay, well, we've got some additional questions. However, we're getting low on time, and in addition, we have some of these answers on our website. Again, that's georgiasolar.org. So please, I would encourage you, if you're not already a member, to check out some of the you know, great member benefits that we have. On September 10th of this year, we're going to be hosting our 5th annual Solar Summit. It's a really awesome event, a day-long in Georgia, in Atlanta here, on Georgia Tech's GTRI campus. And then we always come up with a great keynote speaker and really invite the community out to support solar, to talk about some of the future applications of solar. I know that storage, you know, back to batteries, is going to be something that we can, you know, touch upon. So please put that down, save the date on your calendar, September 10th. In addition, we've got our solar golf tournament coming up. Check our website out to really see all of the awesome events that we schedule and provide for our members. I want to thank you for joining us this evening. This is the first of a couple webinars. You can look forward to ones geared toward more of the commercial application of solar. But again, thank you very much for joining us. We're definitely open to suggestions. Don't be afraid to drop us some emails and to use our resources. And if I could ask one thing of you this evening before I sign off, please tell a friend about georgiasolar.org. We're going to see a large influx in this Georgia market that we've never seen before, and we at Georgia Solar really want to make sure that the consumers are well educated. So tell a friend, tell someone at your place of worship, and get the word out about solar. Be an advocate. So again, thank you very much for joining this evening, and until we meet again.